Buenas noches, bienvenidos. Es un honor tenerlos aquí esta noche en este evento organizado por Management of Reality, que marca el cierre de la serie de eventos Black and White, donde abriremos un espacio de preguntas directas con dos mentes brillantes, Francisco GIL-WHITE y Edwin Black. Antes de comenzar, quiero agradecer a las personas que hicieron posible este evento: Isaac Sterenberg, Denny Michan, Pepe Serur, Joel Katz, Esther Sherem, Alinta Mes. Su apoyo y compromiso han sido fundamentales para que estemos aquí esta noche. También quiero agradecer a Víctor Goldner y Mauricio Vicas y a toda la Kailash que nací de México, y especialmente a Ramat Shalom y Yavne, con la cual colaboramos en la producción de los primeros dos eventos de esta serie. También quiero hacer un agradecimiento especial a Sara, cuyo apoyo personal ha sido invaluable para que yo pueda seguir adelante con esta labor. Nos encontramos en un momento crítico. El antisemitismo nunca ha desaparecido y no desaparecerá. Ha mutado, ha cambiado de forma, pero sigue presente en el mundo. Y lo más peligroso no es solo su existencia, sino nuestra falsa sensación de seguridad. El 7 de octubre nos demostró una vez más una verdad que muchos prefieren ignorar. Tenemos enemigos que no solo desean destruirnos, sino que disfrutan activamente de nuestro dolor. El mundo no nos va a defender. No nos tienen compasión, no les duele nuestro sufrimiento. Pero no solo eso, muchos lo celebran y nos culpan de nuestra propia tragedia.
Today, we cry for the Bibas family, but the world is looking away. Sadly, it has been the suffering that for us, it has awakened us, it hits us, and we wake up, at least partially. But it was enough. If we don't say stop, enough, if we don't make a real change, it's just time that will separate us from the next tragedy. If we take action today, we can avoid this from happening. Story has shown us that waiting only leaves us more vulnerable. The not doing anything is the greatest danger. They sold the idea that we had allies, and the United States have been presented as our main protector, giving us a fake sensation of safety. But as Edwin and Francisco have documented, they're not only not supporting us, but in many occasions they've worked actively against us, and they've enabled our destruction. How many more times we have to see this to be able to understand reality? The lesson is clear. No one is going to help us. This is not only a fight for the Jews, it's also a fight for all of the Western society. Anti-Semitism and attack against the Jewish state are not separated incidents. They're the front of battle in the world of the Western world. We allowed them to destroy us, that are fake narratives triumph. We're opening the door for the fall of the values and ideas of our organization. What is at stake? Not only the future of Israel, but all of the free world. The only defense that we have is ourselves. If we don't wake up, we don't fight for our own safety, for our own narrative, for our own history, no one is going to do it for us. The words of Hillel resonate today more than never. If I'm not for me, who's going to be there for me? If I'm only for me, who am I? If it's not now, then when? We cannot wait. The moment of acting is now. That's why it exists, Management of Reality in Spanish, Management of Reality. Our work is more than analysis and discussion. It is a fight for the truth, a fight for defending us with knowledge, with data, with history, with strategy. Our impact is in clarity, because when we get to know the truth is when we make decisions and actions that are different. Those decisions can change the journey of history. An example of this is the Oslo Accord that was approved for one vote. If the population would have known the truth about who they were letting into the state of Israel, wouldn't be approved, and in consequence, the 7th of October would have never happened, and other tragedies that it brought to us. getting the light, the truth to the light, it's not only an act, it's something that helps us tangibly to the future. Because if not, if we don't understand the reality, we cannot defend ourselves. And when we unmask the false narratives, when we defend hypocrisy, when we present the truth without fear and as it is, then it's when we can show the truth. We're not only here to talk, we're here to wake up. The content that we produce in Management of Reality are seen for more than 500,000 of people every month. This is only the beginning. Each piece of information that we share, every truth that we expose, contributes to a real transformation and tangible transformation. Today, we are driving a campaign to publish for the first time in paper the first tome of the series of books, The Collapse of the Western World from Francisco GIL-WHITE. A key piece to understand the future and the ideas of our fight. If you want to contribute, you can donate, and you can find information on the pages that are in your tables. We have two researchers that are content in this. Edwin, historian, author of many bestsellers that have changed the world. In IBM and Holocaust, he documented how the United States IBM company was the machine for the Nazi regime. In a war against the weak, he saw how the greatest wealthy scientists and scholars were the ones that developed eugenism that was later adopted by Germans to create Nazism. The investigation and research allows us to see that we, the freedom fighters, can find the way for people to get home. Francisco GIL-WHITE, thinker, academic, has been studying anti-Semitism for decades and its impact in the global economy. He has insisted that if we don't wake up and take action, an attack against the Jewish people is going to be unavoidable. Many desestimated, but the reality has shown that he was right. His work has exposed uncomfortable truths, challenging the narratives imposed and considering the structures that have created anti-Semitism worldwide. The dynamics of this event is simple. You make the questions. You can raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. The questions can be in English or in Spanish, directed to one or to both. The answers are going to be in English. The ones that do not speak English, we recommend you to get a headset with simultaneous interpretation that you can find in the entrance. If you need a few minutes to go get them, we can give you a few minutes. We want questions that are specific, not declarations or Megillot. Francisco and Edwin are going to answer in a maximum of 3 minutes per question to allow the greatest amount of participation as possible. At the end, each one is going to give a comment about what they consider the most important to highlight. This is a space of real debate where there's no forbidden questions, but a fundamental rule: precision in the facts and honesty in analysis. I would like to invite you to take advantage of this opportunity. Tonight is not the night to be quiet. Let's start. Go ahead. Who wants to make the first question? Maybe it's going to be in English. I don't know.
Wow. Fabulous.
Hola, buenas noches. Good night. I'm Juan Ludlow. I've read most of what Francisco has written and a lot of what you have written. So I have some background. But I have one question that keeps bugging me. Why did Hitler decide to attack Russia? Because that changed everything, as far as I can understand. So that's just the first question for background for me, and then we'll have all the questions.
Who is the question for? For both of us? Okay.
Francisco.
You want me to start? Okay. Okay, well, the historical documentation on that is pretty clear that Adolf Hitler always meant to attack Russia. So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which the Third Reich signed with the Soviet Union, which was a non-aggression pact, was always dishonest on the part of Adolf Hitler. And it was intended as a ruse so that the Soviets would lower their guard and it would then be easier to launch a surprise attack against the Soviet Union. Now, something that most historians, or I should say all historians, have missed is that the attack on Great Britain by the German Nazis was also part of that ruse. In other words, the very famous Battle of England was really, it was a distraction. The historians who have specifically looked at the Battle of England have concluded that there was really no way, it was impossible for the German Nazis to invade Great Britain. The German planes, the German fighter jets, could only cover a tiny little triangle on the southeast portion of the British Isles. Most of the industrial base of the British was beyond the reach of the German fighter jets, and therefore all that the Germans could do was drop a few bombs in London and a few of the provinces in the lower part of Great Britain. So, we now know, it's very well established that at the same time that they were dropping those bombs, they were moving most of their troops to the east. So really, there was no intention of invading Great Britain. The whole thing was a distraction. And indeed, they were able to launch a surprise attack against the Soviet Union. So it is not that Adolf Hitler suddenly decided to invade the Soviet Union. It was always part of the German Nazi doctrine that they needed Lebensraum, or living space, to the east for the Aryan race. And it was part of the plan from the beginning.
Wish me to add? Well, first, I'd like to compliment Ricardo for an amazing presentation. And the only way it can be improved upon is if everybody here takes it to heart. Excellent, Ricardo. So that's leadership. So, Francisco's got it correct, except it could be more refined if you added the word, not Hitler's plan, but Hitler's delusion. Hitler had the delusion that his country of 60 million could mobilize in such a way that it could take over all of what was called, for quite a bit, Nazi Europe. I think there's a couple of features here that are important. Yes, it was always his plan. He was stuck, Hitler, on the way in on June 1st and June 2nd, 1941, because he needed the oil in Iraq. And that's how we came to the Farhud, which I've written a book about. Another thing to comprehend is that Stalin was so shocked by the invasion, he locked himself in his apartment for several days, almost a week. And finally, they pulled him out and they said, "You've got to come out and lead the troops or say something." And he finally did. Ultimately, it was a delusionary change in direction of the tanks, as you well know. And once those tanks went south instead of that away, the path was open for Russia to decimate the Nazi forces. So yes, it was not a strategic plan. It was a delusional plan. It was built up. It came out of what he said, which is Lebensraum, but also the race science that he would ultimately enslave and destroy the Eastern European, the communists and the Polish and the Russians. Very good question. Thank you.
¿Quién?
Was Stalin part of the eugenistics movement?
Was who part of eugenics?
Stalin.
There was some minor involvement in eugenics that the Stalinists engaged in. Everybody worldwide was tinkering with eugenics, but the regime that lived and breathed eugenics, the regime that built its entire military strategy around eugenics, the regime that took American eugenics and used it to medicalize and scientifically elevate their purely racist ideology. That was Germany. Now there was eugenics. Eugenics originated in Europe. It was a different, in England. It was a different eugenics. It was a experimental eugenics, and it was ultimately abandoned because of the Catholic Church and the labor unions. There was eugenics to a degree in the Nordic countries because Sweden was very interested in all of this. But the negative eugenics that Francisco has talked about, the negative eugenics that became a murderous science, that originated in the United States years after Galton introduced it in England, and it was reignited in the United States with the rediscovery of Mendel's principles of heredity in 1901. And because the elite that absorbed this pseudoscientific information, the bankers, the professors, the lawyers, the surgeons, the university presidents, because many of them were at that time, in the turn of the 18th, 19th century, ranchers. They were farmers. They took Mendel's theory of eugenics and thought, well, the same principles that guide the generations of a pea can be applied to human beings. And what most people don't understand is that the first eugenics Congress was organized, and society proceedings was organized with a special grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Thank you for that question.
Edwin, you said Mendel's theory of eugenics. You meant genetics.
Heredity. Excuse me for yeah. Mendel's principle. I'm glad somebody's checking me. Mendel's principles of heredity.
Siguiente pregunta.
Next.
Next question. Someone.
Gotta wait for this other guy.
Well, what do you think about right now Trump, his promotion of everything in terms of eugenics?
In terms of what?
Eugenics.
So you need to make a more precise question. What do you mean by Trump's promotion of eugenics?
If he's is he a promoter or not?
So you're asking if he's promoting eugenics? Well, eugenics as such, if I may take the first shot at this, I can't see that he has promoted anything specifically in terms of eugenics. To the contrary, the ideologies that have come out of the eugenics movement that we have been living through in the last few years are principally two. One is the pro-abortion movement, which definitely came out of the eugenics movement. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a big eugenicist, and all of her ideas and the entire institutional apparatus that she created was funded by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the people that were behind the eugenics movement. And Trump's political position has been against abortion, and in fact, he has been instrumental in making it possible for the states in the United States to make their own decisions about abortion, whereas before there was a federal law making abortion legal everywhere. And the other big sort of ideological branch of the eugenics movement that we've been dealing with in the last few years is the trans movement. So the people that are behind trans activism and all the grooming that's been going on to convince little children that they're in the wrong body and that they should get hormone therapies and sex change surgeries and so forth, so-called, because you can't change your sex. That's also an offshoot of the eugenics movement. It's been funded by the same people and so forth. So, and Trump has taken a position against all that, an explicit position against all that. So, at least on the surface, one has to say that Trump has opposed the more visible expressions of the eugenics movement in our time.
So if I could just add a little bit to that excellent remark, I can tell you that Trump does not believe in eugenics, does not believe in social coercion, but he does believe in good heredity. I can tell you that he believes that a strong and good father can lead to a strong and good son. But he does this benignly, the way everybody in this room would do it. And he isn't involved in any type of coercion. In fact, during the campaign, the Democrats, who basically, what's the Mexican word for crazy?
Loco.
Loco, yeah. They're nuts. And their specialty was lying. And they said Trump is against IVF, and which, as you know, is the opposite of eugenics because it enables. He just signed.
Tell them what that means, IVF. Intravenous fertilization.
In vitro.
In vitro, forgive me.
Yeah, okay. If it was intravenous, it'd be a problem. Not, but and he just signed an executive order authorizing and making more available IVF treatment. The IVF treatment is the antidote for the person who thinks he can control your reproduction. The remarks that he made, that Francisco very presciently made about the trans movement, is actually something that is almost revolutionary and deserves greater thought, because it really shows another attempt to capture your physical nature. And so this would go not only to trans community, but I'm not sure you're aware of this, the transhumanism community. That is the group of big scientists and big thinkers who think that they will control their own genetic makeup, become supermen, and if they need to have tough skin, they'll mix with an armadillo, and that they will, and they openly claim this, have a super race of what they call the gen rich, that's genetically rich, and they will have dominion over everybody else who will be genetic serfs. Great question and great reply. Thank you, Francisco.
Thank you. If I can add just a little detail, one way to understand the eugenics movement is that the goal of the eugenics movement is to ruin the reproduction of non-Aryans, which according to the eugenics, non-Germanic people, which according to the eugenics are the lower classes all over the West, because the upper classes consider themselves to be descended from Germanic stock, and there's some justice in that belief. So if you think about it, what is the trans ideology doing? It's ruining the reproduction of all kinds of young people, right? And the pro-abortion movement is doing the same thing, right? So what these different ideologies have in common as descendants of the original eugenics movement is that they are intended to ruin the reproduction of an entire generation of young people.
I'm just going to finish it with this topping, and then we'll close. You don't know how close we came to the end of civilization as we know it. We came that close.
Next question.
So before October 7th, Israel was on the brink of a civil war. This was due to the protests. There was many organizations there, but specifically there was one that was very poisonous, called Brothers in Arms. I don't know if you know about this. So they promoted the deserting, or they promoted among soldiers, especially elite soldiers, Air Force soldiers, to not go to training, to not go to reserve duty. And they even told the country, you don't have an army anymore if you do not stop the reform.
The judicial reform, you
The
mean?
judicial reform, yes. Now, this week it just came out that US aid was giving tons and tons of money to all of these organizations, but especially to Brothers in Arms. So why is US aid promoting Israeli soldiers abstain from reserve duty in Israel?
I'll take it if you like. Okay. So, first of all, you're very correct. You're painfully correct. This just came out. We always knew this was going on because I wrote the book Financing the Flames, and I exposed the fact that millions of dollars was being funneled through the the New Israel Fund, and many other left-wing NGOs who were devoted to actually destroying Israel and, to a certain degree, remaking America. And so all of disruptive, you might want to get me another mic, folks. All sorts of disruptive activities were being funneled to the New Israel Fund and its allies through a special program that I exposed in the State Department. All of us in the United States were flabbergasted to find out that our worst suspicions were dwarfed by the nightmare of what has actually occurred. And the Biden administration, which shouldn't be considered an administration of a man, because this man was asleep. It should be considered the administration run by a movement of subversion that was working just below the surface and just to the left and just to the right. I can tell you that one of his closest senior security advisors was a senior executive of Students for Justice in Palestine. So it gave this money because they were fomenting agitation to overthrow Israel, divide Israel. How stupid was it that someone was going to say that the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli reserves would not come into effect, and then on October 8th, they were flooded with recruits. There's something behind this, and that is, first of all, there's a guy called Ehud Barak who should be in jail, and went from being a hero of the Jewish state to probably, and Francisco can check me, its greatest traitor. And he believed that if only 3.8% of the population, and that was the number he used, continuously and visibly and vocally protested, they could bring down any regime, even though they were marginal. You look at these protests. Who's printing up the signs? Who's printing up all of these things? And so anyway, all right. Why? We're going to find out And let me tell you this much. Attorney General Pam Bondi has already opened up investigations, and there will be hell to pay on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, if I can add a little bit of context on this, first of all, I think everybody should go read "Financing the Flames." I mean, it's a fantastic book. It documents, they always tell us follow the money when you want to understand some important political or geopolitical topic. And by golly, Edwin Black has followed the money. Financing the Flames is an excellent book. You're going to understand a lot about who is moving and shaking everything around the world against Israel when you read that book. So please go read it. It's a very, very important book. Just to add a little context on this, Mahmoud Abbas, the real mastermind of PLO Fatah, what we now call the Palestinian Authority, he wrote a PhD thesis in the Soviet Union, the main argument of which was that the way to destroy Israel was to propose peace. Because Abbas's argument was if we promise peace in exchange for territory, that will divide the Israelis. Half of Israel will want to negotiate and the other half will say never. And therefore, proposing peace is the way to divide them down the middle. Because Abbas's goal was to create a civil war. This strategy of Abbas then became official in PLO Fatah's doctrine in 1974 when they produced a document called the Plan of Phases. And what the Plan of Phases says is that they're going to propose peace in exchange for territory in order to produce a process of negotiations that will get them some territory inside the Jewish state from which they will then proceed to destroy the Jewish state, okay? That Plan of Phases became the Oslo process. The Oslo process is the diplomatic implementation of Mahmoud Abbas's strategy. And who put the Oslo process in motion? It was the United States. It was the US bosses. So it's perfectly consistent with that USAID was financing the process inside Israel that was tipping the Israelis into civil war. As you said, on October 6th, they were very close to a civil war precisely because USAID and other anti-Semitic actors were funding the groups in Israel that were trying to tear Israeli society apart. Now, Edwin is pointing out the Biden administration as a great culprit here, and I agree. But I think that when if USAID's activities are fully investigated all the way back to Republican administrations, you're going to find the same thing. You're going to find USAID doing the exact same thing under Republican administrations that they were doing under Democratic administrations. I ask you only to remember what was Iran-Contra. Iran-Contra was the funding, the arming to the teeth of the country, Iran, that launched world jihad and that promised to repeat the Holocaust in Israel. And Ronald Reagan was caught in 1986 sending billions of dollars to Ayatollah Khomeini. All right? So this is not a democratic policy. It is not a leftist policy. It is a policy of the US bosses, whether on the right or on the left. And it has been very successful. Israel has been pushed to the brink of civil war. They're still on the brink of civil war. And I believe, my time is almost up, I'll finish with this. I believe that that the plan on October 7th was precisely along these lines. The idea that Hamas had was not to create a huge massacre the way they did. The idea, I believe, was to take a lot of hostages so that they could produce this negotiation that was going to tear Israeli society apart. But the Hamas terrorists went crazy. They were very hard to control. They saw a lot of Jewish meat there that they could massacre. So they went off script, created a giant massacre, and that had the effect, at least temporarily, of uniting Israelis behind the effort to destroy Hamas. They came out so strong that the other anti-Semitic forces around Israel, which were supposed to join the attack, decided to wait a little bit and see. and Israel was saved for the time being. But I think the plan is still on, and they're still trying to produce a civil war in Israel. And if they succeed, Israel will be destroyed. So we have to be careful about that.
I would just like to add one word uh, to the Biden action, and that one word is Obama. Obama was the hidden puppet master. He was the one. I'm sure Francisco will agree with that.
Okay, next question.
Gee, I'm loving this.
Hi, um, I'm an academic living between Mexico and Argentina, and I see a big difference between the Mexican conservatives and the Argentinian ones. The thing is that, and I'm saying this with all due respect, because I have a lot of Catholic friends, but the thing is that I have seen that they are very anti-Semitic because of the God killing thing. Well, that's what I think and I believe. Last night I was in this class of the professor was one from the Universidad Panamericana, and he was a teacher of Roman right, Derecho Romano, am I right?
Roman law.
Roman law, yeah. And he said something very, very disturbing because someone asked about radical Islamists and if they were a
Asked
danger-
about what? Sorry.
the radical Islamist, the radical Muslims.
Radical jihadis. Yeah.
Yeah. And if they were a threat to the Western civilization. And this professor said that actually the Westerners were the Catholics, nor the Christians, nor the Jews, even though this is the Western Hemisphere, because they align with the Catholic Church and they are the rightful heirs of the Western civilization. The question is, what can we do in the academic level to take back, to pull back that kind of thought that makes the Mexican society, I mean the conservative society in Mexico that should be an ally to the Israeli people. What can we do to counter-arrest that?
Okay, since I'm the Mexican of the two panelists, I'll take this one. So just to give a little context for Edwin, Universidad Panamericana is a Catholic university. It's an Opus Dei university. Opus Dei, yeah. So, well, the fundamental problem is that Roman Catholicism has traditionally been profoundly anti-Semitic. And therefore, Mexican conservatism has also been tied to Roman Catholicism traditionally. And that tends to also push it in the direction of anti-Semitism. So the reason that what you're calling Argentinian conservatism and Mexican conservatism are so different is that Argentinian conservatism is not really conservatism. It's revolutionary libertarianism. That's not the same thing as conservatism. Those people are trying to radically change Argentina. They're not trying to go back or to preserve anything. They're trying to radically transform Argentina. And however, because in common parlance, libertarianism is identified with what they call the right these days, and conservatism is also identified with what they call the right. So people tend to lump those things together, and therefore Argentinian libertarians are sometimes called conservatives, but that's not what they are. Whereas Mexican conservatives are conservatives. Now, it's also true that on the Mexican right there are some libertarians, but maybe 3 or 4 people. There aren't that many libertarians in Mexico. So I don't think they should be lumped together. Mexican conservatives have very little in common with Javier Milei and everything that's going on in Argentina, and one should not confuse them.
Okay, if I may add, being the only non-Mexican up here, I agree with what Senor Francisco has said. The Catholic Church has been promoting deicide as a as a vehicle of anti-Semitism going back to, I think, the 3rd century.
The
And
first century.
the which,
First century.
yes, but in Europe it came around the 3rd century. So your question, in addition to your description, was what do we do about it? Okay, so this is a tough question. You might ask, how come I'm in this hotel speaking to you? Why was I in the Shoals last year? Because the first time I came to Mexico, Francisco took me to all the universities and I had lectures. And last year, that was not possible due to the rise of, in fact, I got an award from one of these in a beautiful leather case. That was not the case. Let me tell you what we're doing in the United States, which is radical, and I don't know if your legal structure permits it here. But Senor Trump, who is now the president of the United States, has issued orders that certain laws and procedures be followed and implemented aggressively. This includes defunding these universities. Remember, these university chairs are funded, and they're not only funded by the U.S. government through USAID and all their phony baloney stuff, but they're funded by Qatar. And in fact, Qatar is the number one, let's use the word, hidden funder of negative university stuff. And so this funding is being cut off. The anti-Semitic stuff that's being ingrained by these guys is being subjected to criminal prosecution, okay, for violation of civil rights. And we're quickly moving step by step upon the ladder to ultimately achieve some sort of correction. I should say that this movement of academic craziness has been tracked by me, and it started at Berkeley in the 1960s. And if you go to the websites, including gender studies and all this trans, it's right there. So if you can defund these guys, criminalize what they're doing, and sue the hell out of them, you will protect not only today's generation, you will help uplift the coming generations.
Next.
Thank you so much. So a little bit about the answer that you just gave. You're answering a little bit of what he asked from a perspective of a person that has a power that can create decrees and can influence on a certain way, but influence on an individual way. How can that be done? And number two, if we think, as we've been talking since the beginning, that United States it's not an ally that we can trust on as for the state of Israel, where is Israel standing without United States, without the backup of United States?
Do you want to go? Sure.
All right.
Edwin, just if you want to divide it into two questions, we can go over the first one first.
So the first question is, you have a man of power. Yes, that's right. I don't know about your power system. I know that you've a Jewish head of state there. That means nothing to me. We all know who the biggest enemy of the Jews is. It's the Jews. And so you have to decide if you have the political structure, disruptive political structure that is taking place in the United States now. 78% of the American political body voted for either a great deal of political change or radical change. And so President Trump, Elon Musk, and his musketeers and all these different guys are coming in to dismantle the entire deep state, administrative state, which has been built up over, let's say, decades. And part of that is what this woman complained about vis-a-vis in the Department of Education and Education. The second thing you said, well, if Israel cannot rely, if America is not an ally of Israel, then what is? Well, America was not an ally of Israel under Biden in 2024, in 2023. Biden did hold back the MK-82 2,000-pound bunker busters. He did hold back the D9 minesweepers from Caterpillar. He did blackmail Bibi Netanyahu every hour, every day to make sure that Bibi was restrained, both so they could cultivate the two-state solution. Minneapolis and Michigan, those were the two states that they cared about, where the Arab population is. That situation is changed. Israel now has a true friend in the White House, one who can be judged on his deeds hour to hour, day by day. And if you have a question in your mind about is Trump delivering for Israel, as I've said in other venues, don't ask Francisco and don't ask Edwin. Just pick up the newspaper tomorrow morning and see what is done. Every day is another earthquake of support for Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, if I understand your question correctly, just to paraphrase it, bueno, voy a hacer la paráfrasis en español, nada más para ver si te entendí correctamente. Estás preguntando ¿qué haría Israel sin Estados Unidos? ¿Cierto? ¿Eso es lo que quieres saber? Okay, so the paraphrase of your question is, what would Israel do without the United States? Now, I think the Oslo process is, if we focus on what the Oslo process has been, right, that gives you the answer to whether the US has been a friend or a foe. Because the Oslo process introduced into the militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state an organization created by the German Nazi final solution, because Al-Fatah was created by Haj Amin al-Husseini, a leader of the final solution, right? And an organization that is responsible for creating jihadi Iran, because PLO Fatah, what we now call the Palestinian Authority, armed and trained Ayatollah Khomeini's guerrillas in Lebanon in the 1970s. And then when the Iranian jihadi revolution triumphed, they went over to Tehran to help create the jihadi institutions of the new Iranian jihadi state. So the Oslo process, which introduced this genocidal organization into militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state, is a process that was backed and led by US presidents from both parties. They were perfectly consistent in this. So the pressure to sign that agreement first came from Daddy Bush, and then the ceremony to sign it was done by Bill Clinton. So you had Republicans and Democrats working together to get this done, the same way that you had Democrats and Republicans working together to put Ayatollah Khomeini in power and then arm him to the teeth. So this was a bipartisan policy. So in my view, this is sufficient evidence to conclude that the US bosses from whichever party are against Israel. Now, what is Israel going to do without the United States? Well, I think it's much better off without the United States. I think that so-called US support for Israel, what the US gives Israel, has been the payment that the US bosses make in order to control Israeli foreign policy. And it's also a strategy to make Israel dependent on the US, so that if they want to, for example, stop giving Israel weapons, they can do that at any moment, like they just did with Biden, as Edwin pointed out, and then Israel is in an impossible position. What Israel should do is stop depending on the U.S., develop way more than it has its own defense industry, and become self-reliant so that it doesn't have to ask for permission to the United States whether it's able to defend itself. No country should be asking any other country whether it can defend itself. Israel is a sovereign country. It can defend itself, and it shouldn't be asking anyone for permission.
These are, if I may, true remarks. And the further truth is that Israel depends critically on America for diplomatic cover, not only in the United Nations, but internationally, Abraham Accords, etc. And Israel must rely currently on the American military supply. Even the F-35s can be stopped by the lack of a code for friend or foe. Israel knows this, and Israel is currently undertaking a crash armament program. But ladies and gentlemen, that'll take 2 years. You don't make an armament program overnight. And even the Iron Dome and the Arrow was all financed by the United States.
Okay, next question.
Thanks so much. Through the history, different civilization has been attempted to exterminate the Jewish people, unlike any other ethnic group in human history. From Egyptians, Philistines, Babylonians, Romans, Catholic Church, during the Inquisition, the Nazis, and some other
Hold the microphone closer to your.
Arab Muslims groups. This pattern has been persisted. Is there any scientific explanation for this, let's say, phenomenon or something? Okay. And another question on top of that is, and I know it's
well. Let me answer this one, and then okay. we'll you can keep the microphone for the second one.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Because I won't remember it if it. So okay, what's the science? If I understand your question, is what's the scientific explanation for or rationale for the historical fact that the Jewish people has been the target of genocidal attacks ever since there has been a Jewish people, right? So, well, the answer I give in my book, The Collapse of the West, is that we have always had in human history, we have always had power elites that are interested in enslaving everybody, okay? Power-hungry elites, totalitarian elites that want to turn everyone into a slave. This has always been the case. So the Greco-Macedonians, the Romans, the Catholic Inquisition, you know, we've always seen these power elites. And if you're one of these power elites that wants to turn everyone into a slave, then naturally you will see the Jewish people as your enemy. Why? Because the Jewish people, as I explain in my books, was founded on the traditional story that you find in Exodus of a slave revolt. In other words, the story of Exodus tells of the ancient Israelites who were slaves of the Egyptian king, and assisted by the deity, assisted by Hashem, the Jewish God, they managed to escape into freedom. So the slaves escaped into freedom. They had their slave revolt. They escape into the desert, into the Sinai desert. And once they are in freedom, they receive a new law. What is this law? Well, it's the law of the escaped slaves. It's designed with great care to protect the rights and liberties of ordinary people. It's designed to divide government so that it cannot oppress ordinary folk. It provides a body of law and a corpus of lawyers, the rabbis and the judges, to enact those laws, to observe those laws, so that ordinary people can be protected from the abuses of the powerful. So the Jewish people is the people that originally taught Westerners how to be free, how to fight against oppression. And therefore, from ancient times until the present, every time a power elite is busy trying to turn all of us into slaves, the first thing they do is try to destroy the Jewish people, because they understand that if Westerners of all colors and traditions understand the value of the Jewish tradition and are inspired by the Jewish tradition, then they're going to be much harder to oppress. So the first thing they do is always try to destroy the Jewish people so that they can enslave all of us. And this is why I always say, because people ask me, why, Francisco, why are you so obsessed with defending the Jewish people? You're not even Jewish. Why are you doing this? And my answer is always, you don't understand. This is not charity. I'm not defending the Jewish people because this is charity for the Jews. I'm defending the Jewish people because this is an act of self-defense. I'm defending myself, my family, my nation, my civilization, because I know that the destruction of the Jewish people is the first step towards destroying all of us. We saw it in World War II. First, they went for the Jews, and then they killed, they killed between 5 and 6 million Jews, but they also killed more than 64 million non-Jews, and they enslaved hundreds of millions of non-Jews, right? So obviously, anti-Semitism is a threat to all of us, to everybody in the West, right? So this is the reason they persecute the Jews. They persecute the Jews because this is the origin of the ideas that we all need to fight oppression and to be free. And the bad guys know that they need to get the Jews first in order to enslave all of us.
Okay, so that's an excellent explanation. I'll add a historical corollary to that. The Jews were expelled. This is a corollary to this fine explanation. The Jews were expelled by the Romans and were dispersed. And they took the sea routes and came up the Rhine River and went into Europe. And part of them, of course, went to India and Asia. Now, wherever they went, they were the outsiders. They couldn't own land. They couldn't achieve citizenship. They couldn't vote. In many places, they couldn't serve in the army. And so they were left in the niche of middlemanship. They were allowed to do something in the middle. They were allowed to sell the pots and pans. They were allowed to make the money lending. They were allowed to lend money. They were allowed to trade in cottons, in ships, in anything that they could. Well, all of this was created the resentment class. And the resentment class was just looking for the fake news that did not begin with Hillary Clinton, but began many centuries ago. The Jews know what fake news is. And we're talking about the blood libel, the using of Christian blood to make Passover matzahs, the poisoning of the wells during the Black Plague, and the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was conceived by the Tsarist Secret Service until it was given to Henry Ford, who then turned it into a mass-marketed machine of anti-Semitism. Remember, going into World War I, in many countries, the Jews could not vote and could not serve in the army. So that's all part of our history. And something that Francisco said, I think it was in our first or second event in this series, he said, well, the Jews overcome, they survive, and they say now everything is hunky-dory, okay. They have a very weak memory. And it's up to people like Francisco and myself to keep the memories alive.
Do you, and it's going to be tough for you as a scientific, is there any spiritual connection behind that? Can we explain that one? I mean, I'm a Christian, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here as well, because I believe, same as you say, Francisco, we need to protect also not just the Jewish people, or support Jewish people. Also, we are protecting ourselves. In century first, after they say trying to exterminate Jewish, they start with the Christians, and that's what they're going to do again.
So what is your question?
Do you believe, as scientific, and it's tough for that, but there is something spiritual behind that?
Okay, so from the scientific point of view, the definition of a miracle would be a violation of the laws of the universe. That would be the definition of a miracle. I think the historical trajectory of the Jewish people is arguably a sociological miracle, because the fact that the Jewish people is organized around a law that was born in a slave revolt and is therefore designed to protect ordinary people, which then provokes power-hungry elites who want to enslave us all to attack the Jews with genocide. What that means is that the Jews should have been the least stable people in history. They should have winked out of history as soon as they appeared, because they become the targets every generation for the most powerful people in the world to destroy them. So you would have expected the Jewish people to be the least stable population in the world. They should have ceased to exist a very long time ago. However, if you analyze all of the different nations that were around 2,500 years ago, all over the world, at the same time as the ancient Jews, practically none of them exist today. And yet the Jews are still here. So the people that should have been the least stable people in the world are actually the most stable people in the world. How do they do it? To me, it looks like a sociological miracle. In other words, and where does that miracle come from? Well, that miracle has to come from the Torah, because the Torah is the book that produces the Jewish people, right? So I think it is an attractive hypothesis that the Torah is producing a sociological miracle. And I find it very hard to believe that the people who wrote the Torah, whoever wrote the Torah, if you believe that a human wrote the Torah in ancient times, you would have to believe that they understood human psychology, cultural evolution, systems theory, and so on and so forth to an exquisite degree, so that they could write down on paper a bunch of words that would produce a people that then produces a sociological miracle generation after generation after generation, and that not only survives the constant attacks to extinguish the people through genocide, but in spite of that, it continues, but also influences all of Western civilization to move politically in the direction of freedom. It's a gigantic achievement, and it seems impossible. So if you want a scientific justification for the belief in divine intervention, I think the Torah and the historical trajectory of the Jewish people are one of the best arguments for that hypothesis.
Okay, let me add a few factual nuts and bolts to that inspiring response, and that is some facts that the Jews in this desert, this miracle in the desert, were the first ones to equalize the law, equality under the law. They built, invented, created the concept of jurisprudence. The first judge was appointed by Moses. His name was Othniel. They decided to have judges. They decided to have procedures. The entire Torah itself, let's use the word Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, is considered the law, but they say the law is insufficient without case law, which is the Talmud, Okay, so that's another body of work, just like you have American law, but you have a constitution, but American law doesn't work without case law. That's how we have law. All right, so that's one part. And remember, there was no democracy or proto-democracy until the American democracy in 1776, an aspiration we're still trying to achieve, but we may get closer in 2025. There's some factual stuff about the religious and theological aspect. Jesus Christ was a rabbi. The Last Supper was a Pesach. There was no bread. Jesus' name was not Jesus, of course. It was probably Yeshua. Yeshua, because the J was only introduced into the into the Romance languages in the 15th century. You take and then you Romanize it by saying Jesus. Okay, so that's what his name was, either Joshua or Yeshua. And the Catholic, the organized churches of the European world have deeply resented the threat of Judaism. Judaism does not evangelize, but it refuses to be evangelized, except in cases like the crypto Jews. So what do we have? We actually have all the examples of radical Islam, dimitude, making Jews second-class citizens, et cetera, et cetera. We also have the fact that the Catholic Church has done terrible, terrible things. Not only the Inquisition in Portugal and Spain, but for heaven's sakes, the Catholic Church was running the concentration camps in Serbia with the Ustashi.
In Croatia.
Croatia, and running it in Croatia. And they were actually the prison guards. Some of the worst of them were Catholic priests. And of course, we know that that the Catholic Pope cut a deal with Adolf Hitler to coexist. Everybody knew what was going on, and the Catholic Church was did nothing to speak up. And then, of course, if they hear me say that, they'll give me the list of all the fine things that was done in the last months of the war, when the Russians were coming over from the east, and the U.S. had already landed at Normandy. So there's a lot to talk about when you raise such an important question. An important question. The answer is tolerance, and this is what the Jews, the organized Jews, have taught, is religious tolerance, and I think it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Next question.
Wait a minute. Senora.
I don't know if you've discussed this already. I was a little late. I'm sorry. I have a question for both of you, because you've both studied the history of eugenics and the eugenic movement. And I want to know both of your perspectives about what's the legacy of that whole thing from late 19th, early 20th century. What do you think it's the legacy of the eugenics movement today, almost 100 years after maybe its worst consequences after the Second World War?
I'll give a brief answer, and then I'll let the great expert give a perhaps longer answer. So we were mentioning earlier, trans ideology is a legacy of the eugenics movement. The pro-abortion movement is also a legacy of the eugenics movement. More covertly, behavioral genetics as an academic discipline is the sort of the transmutation of the academic transmutation of the eugenics movement, and allied with behavioral genetics, the IQ test, the whole IQ test literature. The IQ tests were not invented by a eugenicist. They were invented by Alfred Binet, a French psychologist who was absolutely not a eugenicist. He was the opposite. His definition of intelligence actually was that intelligence is a consequence of what you learn, right? Which is the opposite definition of Cyril Burt and the other eugenicist psychologists who believe that intelligence is the cause of learning, right? So Alfred Binet thought the opposite. He said, no, what happens is if you learn a lot of stuff, you become smarter. Intelligence is a consequence of what you learn, whereas the eugenicists believed in this, it's kind of like a substance that you inherit, and if you have more of it, like a liquid in the brain, then you are smarter, right? And the eugenicist definition of intelligence has been culturally dominant. So everybody today, when they talk about intelligence, they think of it as something that you inherit and something that you cannot alter. And that is one of the biggest victories of the eugenics movement, to have made us think that intelligence is something that is immutable, that is inherited, and that is unalterable. All of that is false. But unfortunately, the eugenics movement has succeeded through the university system to educate us into thinking about intelligence in this way.
Well, I think that these comments about intelligence testing and Alfred Binet and the concepts of moron and idiot and these other scientific terms is really just a plant within the jungle of eugenics. I think the murderous eugenics that you are asking about that grew up in the United States required three major ingredients. It required a power, it required money, and most of all, it required arrogance. You had to believe that you were better than the next guy, or there was a basis for devaluing your life, whether it's through this phony intelligence testing of the alpha and beta test that Binet and his friends came up with, or racial stock.
Not Binet. That the alpha and the beta. That
No,
was
they
the
came after Binet.
Yeah,
right.
So Binet was not a eugenicist.
Well,
no. He was the opposite.
All right. Let's say Binet was not a eugenicist, but certainly his terminology fed into the eugenics movement in a great way. So what has happened now? Eugenics is dead in the United States in terms of classic eugenics, which means we identify people and we kill them. That was the American eugenics ideal. First law proposing public gas chambers was in Ohio in 1908. And eventually they intended to kill 10% at a time until no one was left except those who resembled themselves, and themselves meant blonde, blue-eyed, and Aryan or Nordic. When the eugenic movement faltered fatally when the Allies invaded the camps and saw what the American system had wrought. In fact, the great Nazis pleaded the California eugenic statutes, and the Supreme Court decisions, three generations of imbeciles is
Buck versus Bell.
Buck versus Bell. This guy's read in my book, and they said we just followed you. So what happened is all these eugenic departments in Long Island and Harvard, University of Indiana, Yale, they all changed their name from eugenics to genetics. Same organizations, same professors, same offices, but they now called themselves genetics. So from the eugenic came the genetic world and marriage counseling, and with this pseudo libertarian death cult called Planned Parenthood, which is just another form of death inducing. Well, over the decades, the eugenics that I've spoken of, that we have complained of, has died out and has been replaced with concepts like designer babies. And I have worked a great deal with the deaf, and the deaf do not want, who are missing a cochlear implant, do not want their kids to be hearing. And so they go to doctors and say, what can you do to take my infant's hearing away? They do not, the dwarfs, the little people, do not want to have children who are 6 feet tall. And they say, what can you do genetically to modify that? These different aspirations have led to what I call newgenics. And newgenics is another way of evaluation of who has a right to be alive, who can thrive, and who will be subordinated to the upper eugenic class or newgenic class. And that will be newgenics corporate, based on corporate value. It will no longer, and political value, it will no longer be based on national flags, on whether there's a crescent, a cross, or a Magen David on your front door, or on the color of your skin. It'll be based on your value to those who have the power. And part of that, a subset, is the trans movement that you talked about. So remember, we aren't talking about a straight line. We're talking about tributaries that all go into one evil course. That's the answer.
He's pushing to extend the Abraham Accords. I wanted to ask, what are your predictions in regards to this? Can we trust this one, or is another trap as the Oslo Accords? How can we trust Trump if even before taking office he's pressuring Israel to exchange hostages for prisoners, if even though this is immoral, and I mean he's pressuring Israel to do this?
Okay, so one, the Abrahams is the Abraham Accords is not a trap. The Abraham Accords is fabulous, and the Abraham Accords held every hour of every day during the Hamas war. Second of all, forget about this stuff of what Trump did before he was president. In October, in November and December of 2024, he was basically powerless, and what he arranged was within the context of a dual competing official effort by Biden and Blinken. May both names burn. And so what has he done now? When you say, well, how can we trust him? You can use the old Reagan term, trust but verify. If you're worried, read the newspaper tomorrow morning. Because whatever Trump does, he doesn't just talk about it, he does it. He's a man of results. And right now, he has been flawless. And whatever arrangement he made when he was not president, not in power, that has been torn up. He has made it clear. I'm done with that agreement. The gates of hell are going to open up, and we will support. Now, the gates of hell opening up doesn't mean that suddenly the gates open up and out comes the hell. The gates are open, and we will decide when the hell comes out, and the hell is a-coming.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to mix it up a little bit because Edwin and I don't agree on this. So I'm going to make it interesting for all of you.
But I'm right.
So I think the key issue here is, what does it mean when you sign an agreement, a peace agreement with Muslims? Well, how should you interpret that? In Islamic doctrine, in Islamic law, Muslims are told that they are allowed to lie to infidels, and therefore they're allowed to sign peace agreements with infidels that they never intend to keep. And that's the concept of hudna. Now, this happens even when you sign agreements with supposedly secular Muslims. So there was a peace agreement signed with Egypt in 1979 between Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. And we know now that Egypt has not honored this peace agreement. So when the Philadelphia corridor on the border between Gaza and Egypt was finally controlled by the IDF in this recent war, more than 150 tunnels were discovered through which Egypt was supporting Hamas's hostilities against Israel. So that's a complete violation of the peace agreement, as is the presence of Egyptian troops all over the Sinai right now. If we can't trust agreements signed with Egypt, which is a supposedly secular Muslim state, then how can you trust an agreement signed with the Emirates, which is a jihadi state? Emirates is no different from Qatar. Emirates is run by a jihadi family that has a giant population of slaves doing all the work inside Emirates. And the ideology of jihadis is the extermination or enslavement of infidels. And of course, they mean to destroy Israel in genocide. So what is the practical consequence of the Abraham Accord signed with Emirates? Well, that Emirates is now getting US weapons. That was one of the consequences of that accord. Now, Edwin says they haven't violated the agreement. Well, yeah, not yet. Just like you could have said that Egypt hadn't violated the agreement in the first few years, but eventually they did. And I think Emirates eventually will violate the agreement as well. But the more important principle is that we have no reason to trust them. Therefore, signing agreements with them, I don't think is rational. So the effort to keep extending peace agreements with jihadi forces, I think, is counterproductive. What we need to do is defeat them. We need to defeat them in the field of battle, and we need to defeat them culturally and politically, because jihadism is a threat to the entire West, not only to Israel.
Well, this is cherry picking the facts. Everything that Francisco said is mostly correct, but not completely correct. So, the peace treaty held. Did they cheat? Did they help the tunnels? Well, I happen to know they also flooded the tunnels. Did they provide escape routes from Rafah to send Hamas fighters to Turkey? Did they do everything that he just said? Yes. But what was achieved? What was achieved was military disengagement. No one has ever described the peace treaty with Egypt in any other term than a cold peace. So basically, it was the absence, not of agitation, not of hatred, not of cheating, but of those tanks coming across and weaponry in full-scale, 1,000-man-a-day killing. Now, have the tanks come across in Egypt? Yes. In 2 instances, Israel gave a waiver to allow those tanks to build up their forces to fight ISIS in Sinai. The problem is that, as Francisco and our circles know, that Egypt is now rearing its ugly head and has overpopulated the Sinai with tanks. The Israel-hating Biden administration in the last days of December approved scores of M1A1 tanks and billions of dollars into Egypt. Any peace, the peace between any treaty, the treaty between the U.S. and Great Britain on the line of Canada, the peace with Panama, the Treaty of Hidalgo in 1848, ceding half of Mexican territory to the United States. Any treaty and any peace treaty is only as good as the people who monitor it and enforce it, trust but verify. And it is true that if anyone is going to disregard a treaty, it's going to be a Muslim who, not any Muslim, but a Muslim who believes in this concept of hudna, which is that we don't believe in treaties, we only believe in alliances, we only believe in truces, and we believe in what we call the strong horse. Who is the strongest guy? That's who we're going to ally with. And right now, the strongest guy in the Middle East is Israel. It ain't Hezbollah and it ain't Hamas, and it's Israel. And as of 30 days ago, they just magnified their strength and their power to overcome their enemies. So I say, give peace a chance, but watch it like a hawk. And if you don't take care of it, it will fall apart, and the peace will lead to war. So we have to watch ourselves. If that's for me, take a message, please.
Quick comeback. So I think here, so Edwin is once again mentioning Biden, but the truth of the matter is that the peace treaty with Egypt, one of the things it did is it got Israel out of the Sinai. Now, if Israel had kept the Sinai, it wouldn't have any trouble with Egypt. But what the peace treaty did was get Israel out of the Sinai. And it also initiated a process by which the U.S. would arm Egypt to the teeth. Ever since 1979, the U.S. has been giving weapons and an enormous amount of money to Egypt. How is that in anybody's interest, to arm Egypt to the teeth? But that's the consequence of signing a peace treaty, and that's a peace treaty that the U.S. insisted on. They twisted Menachem Begin's arm to sign that peace treaty. So now you say, well, yes, Egypt has not launched a full-fledged attack against Israel. Okay, but all of those weapons that that Egypt has been getting from the United States are going to be used someday. That's my claim. And therefore, I don't think these peace treaties that have as a consequence that Muslim enemies of Israel keep getting armed to the teeth are a good idea. I don't think Israel should be signing peace treaties with anyone. I think Israel should be defeating the jihadis and securing its borders through strength.
Okay. He left out three letters. The three letters in the alphabet that people like me know. And insiders in Washington know. The three letters are QME. Now, what does QME mean? It's a congressional term. It's an American military term called qualitative military edge. It's true that Egypt got weaponry, but Israel was always assured by statute, by congressional action, to have a qualitative military edge in terms of quantity, in terms of capability, and that would be anywhere in the Arab world. The thought that Israel should not have peace treaties must be completely disregarded. If you want peace, you need peace treaties. The peace treaties can come because you defeat your enemy or you make a deal and you guard the peace, but Israel cannot live without peace treaties. The whole concept is unthinkable.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, I would like you guys to talk about your favorite topic, which is security services, the CIA, intelligence. You have completely opposite views of that. So I think we will learn a lot. Francisco has said that Trump has to disappear the CIA, vanish, shouldn't exist, cannot exist, will always come back and eat democracy. security services. That's your position. And I think I'm hearing you that security services are necessary. So I would like to listen to a dialogue between you guys, because I think dealing with this issue is going to put a lot of people at peace or not about what's going to go on in the next few years here, because there is going to be a lot of tension. And how is that tension going to be processed with or without security services?
Okay, I'll answer first. I'm the only guy who's actually been inside the CIA, and I'm the only guy who actually investigated and dethroned the director of national intelligence for his anti-Semitic work and investigated series. Everybody knows or theorizes everything that Francisco has said about the evils of the CIA and the IC, which is the intelligence community, whether you call it the DIA, Defense Intelligence, the CIA, State, all of these places, the FBI. These guys thought that they were on the B team. We were here before you, and we will be here after you. No one tells us what to do. Francisco was right about that. But a new sheriff came into town approximately 31 days ago, not quite yet. And he is dismantling disruptively the complete intelligence community, which had ganged up on him the way they ganged up on Martin Luther King, the way they ganged up on all of these other Americans, and the way they tried to subvert our personal, civil, and national rights. We're talking about outsiders like Tulsi Gabbard. We're talking about Radcliffe. She's the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence. She goes over the 13 to 16 different intelligence agencies, including the FBI. We're talking about John Radcliffe, the head of the CIA. And as of 10 hours ago, we're talking about Kash Patel to dismantle the worst part of the FBI. So,
if you allow me, I think very good topic is you're responding now on how the CIA is acting now under Trump. But I think an interesting question is, no matter who's the president, should the CIA exist as an institution? Because right now you have a president that you trust, but tomorrow you may not. Or that president.
All right, so I was just leading to that. The CIA must exist. Now, if you want to take it out of Langley and you want to call it something else, you want to call it the OSS reorganized, or you want to call it the security services, it doesn't matter, because there is a CIA in Russia, there is a CIA in Egypt, there is a CIA in Iran, in Turkey, in England. England is the master MI6 and MI5 of skullduggery. So the CIA must exist, but it must be taken down, reformed, depoliticized, and turned into a service that will not be a threat to our freedoms, but will advance our freedoms. For anyone to say we got to get rid of the CIA is another way of saying we need to destroy our military. We need to destroy our armed forces. We need a CIA. And guess what? We're going to have one, whether it's called the CIA, the ABCIA, or the ABCDIA.
Okay, so I think it's very important to distinguish between two different kinds of activities that an agency like the CIA engages in. So one is information gathering and the other one is clandestine operations. And it's important not to confuse them. it is certainly possible to have an intelligence agency that is not a threat to democracy, and that would be an intelligence agency that is focused solely on the gathering and processing of publicly available information. That, I think, is definitely necessary. Every country needs it, and it is no threat to democracy. What is a threat to democracy is clandestine operations. So my arguments are based on the observations of Maurice Joly, who I believe is the greatest political theorist of all time. He wrote a very important book called Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu during the time of the French Second Republic, which became Napoleon III's liberal empire, so-called liberal empire. And what Maurice Joly explained was that if you allow a clandestine service, this is what he was criticizing, the idea of a clandestine service. In other words, if you allow the government to have an agency that can spend the money of the citizens in secret to do whatever they want with it, then obviously they will start corrupting the entire system, because you're giving them a lever of power that they will be too tempted to use. Nobody can resist that. Let's talk about the CIA. The CIA was created primarily as a clandestine service. The clandestine service of the CIA gobbles up the overwhelming majority of the money that is assigned to the CIA. And in the National Security Law of 1947, which is the law that created the CIA, the law stipulates that the CIA is allowed by law to initiate any action it wants, any moment, without asking anyone. And they can postpone the report of any such activity indefinitely, just putting a stamp of national security on it. And that's a determination they make themselves. So they're basically above the law. And the same national security law stipulates that the whole point of the CIA is to corrupt the media, the financial institutions, the political processes, and so on in foreign countries. Right? So technically, they're not allowed to do that in the United States, but they're expressly allowed to do that to other countries. I don't think that's in anybody's interest. I think that Ricardo's point is goes to the heart of the matter. Right now, Edwin trusts Trump to clean up the CIA, but if the law is not altered, if the CIA continues to have the ability to spend the enormous amount of money that U.S. citizens contribute to the fiscus, then they will continue to have the power to corrupt U.S. institutions. We've seen this. We've had dramatic events in U.S. history. One of them was the Church Committee in the 70s. Another one was the Iran-Contra investigation in the 80s that revealed that the CIA was in fact corrupting the entire system. They were corrupting the media, the universities, the citizen organizations. The first of these investigations was by Ramparts magazine, which showed that they had corrupted the entire National Student Association, turned it into a front for the CIA, and so forth. So as Maurice Joly explained, you end up with a counterfeit democracy, where you think that you have an organic democracy and citizens are participating, etc. But behind the scenes, the clandestine service is controlling everything. Now, to see how dangerous this is, you only have to go read Christopher Simpson's book, Blowback, where he documented, with documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, that the CIA was in fact created by absorbing Adolf Hitler's intelligence infrastructure in Eastern Europe. It was recreated for the US by the Nazi general Reinhard Gehlen, something that was called the Gehlen Org. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of CIA staff were these Nazis. So I think it's a terrible idea to allow bureaucrats to have this kind of secret power. And the history of the CIA makes it amply clear that we would be a lot safer if we simply abolished it and allowed only the collection and analysis of publicly available information. Certainly, that aspect of intelligence is necessary for any state, and I don't think that's a danger to us. What's a danger to us is clandestine operations.
Okay, so a lot is left out here. First of all, the idea that that the CIA or something like the CIA or the successor to the CIA should just be involved in information and analysis. You want information and analysis, may I direct you to Wikipedia. Now, The clandestine services are indispensable in our world. For example, you want to have Stuxnet put into an Iranian computer system. You want to find out where Soleimani is at any given moment of the day. You want to find out the name of the woman who's cleaning the room in Tehran where the Israelis attacked and took out the Hezbollah and Hamas people. If you want those types of services, you must have a clandestine services. Now, it grew out of the OSS, the Overseas Services, the Office of Special Services, which helped the Maquis, the French resistance, and of course later other resistance movement overcome the Nazis. The law that he cites specifies that the CIA may not have any operations inside the United States of America. The only thing they're allowed to do is recruit. I've been to their recruitment offices. Additionally, nothing can be done in the CIA, especially the clandestine services. I know most people don't know this and will find it hard to believe, that is not overseen by the Gang of Eight in Congress. That is the ranking and the chairman of each of the 4 committees that oversight the CIA and the intelligence services are aware of individual actions with oversight of killing activities and neutralizing. If you want to take down ISIS, if you want to take down the jihadists, if you want to be in a world where MI6 and the successor to the KGB and the French and the Chinese with their profound infiltration services. If you want to coexist in that, you do need clandestine services. But those clandestine services must not become cancerous and try to eat away at the body politic. So look,
Okay.
I know what some guy wrote in France generations ago. I know what Christopher Simpson did in the 60s and 70s. I was there. Believe me, the CIA knew who I was, and I physically tried to knock the door down of their secret office in Chicago. That is then, and this is now. It's important that Jews have eyes in the back of their head. I agree with you, but let's not get hypnotized by the mistakes of the past. Let's keep them as reminders of how bad things can go, but let's try to recognize when progress is made. And right now, we're seeing a complete dissimulation of the security services. And starting tomorrow, 65 generals are going to be fired by Pete Hegseth in the military. These are the powerful guys.
Let's start to wrap up.
All right, so that's it.
Do we have time for a quick comeback?
No,
Are you afraid of me?
never.
Okay, then we can have a
I'm
little...
just trying to be polite.
All right, so I think the comeback here is too easy for me because I can use Edwin Black against Edwin Black. So Edwin Black is the great historian of eugenics. And what he documented was that the Rockefeller family was the great financier and leader of the eugenics movement. The same Rockefellers, so Nelson Rockefeller and David Rockefeller, were the guys in charge of absorbing all those Nazis to create the CIA through their friend and retainer Allen Dulles. So I don't see how somebody who's defending the Jews can defend clandestine services when it produced a CIA that was a nest of Nazis. And I'll say something else. We just heard the argument that we need clandestine services to protect us from jihadis because we need to know what Iran is doing and so on and so forth. Let me tell you, the reason we have world jihad is the CIA. The Nazis in the CIA are the ones who took the Shah out and put Ayatollah Khomeini in power. They're the guys who armed Ayatollah Khomeini to the teeth. That is what Iran-Contra is. So if you're telling me we need the CIA to defend ourselves from jihadis, what I tell you is the reason we have the jihadis is the CIA. We would have been much better off if there had never been a CIA that could act in secret to produce world jihad, which is what they did. Now, if Trump is the good guy that's going to clean up the CIA, wonderful. But the problem is, as Ricardo pointed out, that the next guy may not be a good guy. And if the law remains in place that allows the CIA to do whatever they want in secret, sooner or later there's going to be a bad guy who's going to use the CIA to corrupt the entire system again. Western democratic citizens should not allow any government to spend their money in secret. We are sovereign. If we are democratic citizens, we are sovereign, and the government is our servant. It is our money that they're spending. We should know where every single cent goes. The minute the bureaucrats can spend our money without telling us where it went, we become slaves. And fighting slavery is what the Jewish movement is all about.
Next question.
All right, I'm not going to respond to that because we don't have time, but I'm sure you know my answer. Ben Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it.
I agree. It seems you're making my argument.
No.
Well, okay, thank you. I would like to, if you could elaborate about the ceasefire treaty with Israel and Hamas. You mentioned that some of these treaties for keeping peace are created or dealt by the people that win the wars. And for most of us, we think that Israel won this conflict. It is not a war against Hamas, but the ceasefire agreement, at least for me and many other people, it seems that Israel is giving too much, as if Israel had lost the war. And we don't know what is your point of view in the middle and the long term for Israel with this ceasefire.
Okay, I'll take it first. First, I'd like to add something. It's true that I'm the historian of eugenics, but I'm also the historian of petroleum, military movements, and the rise and fall of empires. So I've written many books, not just one, even though they all intersect, including IBM and the Holocaust, Nazi Nexus, and British Petroleum, and the Red Line Agreement. Now, to your question, is the ceasefires or truces, whatever word you want to use, have been vile, disgusting, and would have never been agreed to in the first place, except for continuous, hour to hour, even into the last days of January, even to January 9th, blackmail by the Biden administration, threatening not only to hold back arms, but to get Israelis arrested. Bibi Netanyahu flew home from Washington, avoiding Canadian airspace so as not to get arrested. Okay? Now, we need the hostages back. And we will never think that we won this war until Hamas is completely and utterly destroyed, militarily, politically, organizationally. That's every commander and every pizza and water boy in the Hamas operation. But it's more than that. I believe that there's not one innocent civilian in Gaza. It's a cradle to grave death cult. And since they took over, you've got mothers who mourn the death of their sons and say, I want to raise 5 more to kill the Jews. And you've got a complete international infrastructure to support this. And this is over now. And it's over because the rules of peace treaties are now coming to an end. The gates of hell have been unlocked. Let's say they're not open. Let's say they've been unlocked. They've been formally unlocked. So Israel reluctantly, everyone in Israel will say, I hate this peace, but I want the hostages back. I hate this, but I need this. We have to watch this hour to hour. And as you may know, Francisco knows, the Bibas mother was not returned. They returned a fake corpse. I don't know how stupid they were, because they know we have the most advanced forensics in history. And so we shall see what happens. And if there's any lawyers in the room, and maybe Francisco can weigh in on this, I believe a contract negotiated under duress is non-binding. So I expect all these forced, monstrous, demonic hostage treaties to be overcome rapidly. And once we get every corpse and every live person back, there will be hell to pay, and there will be a new order in the Middle East. And I believe that if we do it correctly, the next guy after Trump, unless, of course, he decides he's going to run again, the next guy after Trump is going to continue the progress. So we need to worry, we need to check, and we need to proceed. Nobody likes this peace, but everybody will savor the victory. And that victory is around the corner, I promise you.
I believe that the whole point of imposing hostage negotiations on the Israelis is meant to produce a civil war in Israel. That's what they're for. And I believe this circus is going to continue, because that's the policy of the U.S. bosses, and it's the policy of Netanyahu, who I believe is a traitor. So I trust Netanyahu even less than I trust Donald Trump. And if you think about the history of these processes, it's very clear. So we could talk about many hostage negotiations that have taken place over the years, but the one that is emblematic and entirely sufficient to understand the structure is the Gilad Shalit negotiation. So to liberate Gilad Shalit, who was a soldier, Netanyahu released a little bit over 1,000 terrorists from Israeli jails. And the consequence of that was October 7th, 2023, because among those terrorists was Yahya Sinwar and some of his colleagues who organized the horrendous attack of October 7th. Now, suppose I told you that there's an innocent person who's been taken hostage, and the people holding that person hostage say, we'll send this person back, but you have to kill someone else. You have to kill someone in your country so that you get this guy back. What would you say? You would say that is completely unethical. That's exactly what Israel did with the Gilad Shalit negotiation. They killed 1,200 Israelis and caused 250 Israelis to become hostages in exchange for Gilad Shalit. That's what they did. So that's completely unethical, and that's the kind of thing that divides Israelis down the middle. Moreover, the negotiation to free Gilad Shalit is a case of human shields. When Hamas uses civilians to protect their soldiers, everybody says that's unethical. You can't use civilians to protect the fighters. That's upside down, right? Well, what Israel did in the Gilad Shalit negotiation was sacrifice civilians who would absolutely be killed by the terrorists they released for a soldier who was being held hostage. That's a human shields policy. It's just as unethical when Israel does it as when Hamas does it. Okay, so no, I think this is going to continue. This has been the policy of a treasonous Israeli government. It's also the policy of the United States. And I don't think anything I'm saying should be controversial. Treason is when you ally with the enemies of your country, and that's exactly what Israeli bosses have been doing ever since they signed the Oslo Accords.
Okay, I'll make a very brief rejoinder. Welcome to the Live Aqua Hotel in Mexico City, where we can say anything we want and tell anybody what to do and decide who is right and who is wrong and who is a traitor and who's a hachim. Okay? But when your ass is on the ground in the Middle East, then it's a different story. And when a few hours ago, the buses blew up and they had planned to kill hundreds of people, and that was caught. That's a different story. And I would say that it's good to know history, but history is like a sand dune. It's constantly shifting and transmogrifying. There is no way that the lousy Gilad Shalit deal could have been foreseen to lead to October 7th. What led to October 7th was the arrogance of self-hypnotic desire to have peace, the falsehood that Israel was in Midtown Manhattan and it could maintain peace. The fact that they see these guys hang gliding, they see these guys training, they see the videos, and they said, nah, they're never going to do it because we're giving them suitcases of cash from Qatar. We're giving them hospitals. We're giving them food. We're giving them all these types of things. You cannot say that all of these events are from Gilad Shalit are foreseeable from the next day. But what you can say is that our self-deception, our self-hypnosis, that's what led to October 7th. And I think that they have finally learned, painfully, that they are not in Manhattan, they're in the Middle East, and there will be no compromise with killers. And now that we have a real friend of the Jews in the White House, not a fake one, that Israel will be allowed to make the decisions that are in its best interest without being pressured by the basements in the White House and in Washington. The proof will be in the pudding. Thank you.
Quick comeback, 2 seconds.
Favos.
If a Jew kills an Arab in Israel and is apprehended, judged, and convicted, that Jew doesn't get a get out of free jail card. But if an Arab terrorist kills a Jew in Israel, he has a very good chance of getting out of jail, because sooner or later, there's going to be one of these treasonous hostage negotiations. That, my friend, is apartheid. And it's apartheid against the Jews in the Jewish state. So I have no qualms about calling this treason. The responsibility of the leaders of Israel is to protect Israelis, and that's not what they do. Edwin says that there was no way to foresee that terrorists dedicated to the extermination of the Israeli Jews would go and kill Jewish civilians after they were freed. My opinion is absolutely you should expect that terrorists committed to the extermination of the Israeli Jews are going to kill more Jews once they are freed. And if we impute to the Israeli bosses this level of stupidity, then it is such criminal stupidity that it is indistinguishable from treason. And the most urgent responsibility of Israeli citizens is to get rid of these bosses and to vote in someone who will defend them.
That will happen very soon.
We'll try to get a few more questions in. I'll ask Francisco and Edwin to make the responses brief so we can get a few questions in.
I'm not sure we can do that.
This is a quick question, and I think the answer is going to be like quick. Uh, I'm coming back to the politics in Mexico. This question goes for both of you, for each one in your respective country. Francisco, do you think the right-wing Mexican society is anti-Semitic? And can I do the question for Edwin, like real quick? And the same question goes for you, but the right-winged population in the States, in the US, it's quite different than the Mexican one, as just Francisco mentioned, the difference between Mexico and Argentina. Because I believe in the US, the right wing, the conservatives, there's a mix of libertarians, conservatives, and could I say nationalist or
No.
no? And well, do you think the right wing population is anti-Semitic?
Okay, well, uh, I think the left wing in Mexico is anti-Semitic, profoundly, violently anti-Semitic. I mean, you can see how the Mexican government has reacted to the ongoing war in Israel and the way they have pronounced themselves on the developments there. What about the right wing? Well, it's actually possible that the right wing in Mexico is slightly less anti-Semitic than the left wing, but I don't think they're much better. I think anti-Semitism is a general problem in the West. I think a shining light of hope is the United States, because I think anti-Semitism there is much weaker. But my God, it's very strong in Europe. It's very strong in other parts of Latin America. I think Argentina's getting better. And I think one ray of hope in Latin America is the growth of Christian Zionism in Latin America, because many Latin Americans have been converting to evangelical Christianity or different forms of Protestantism. And as a result, many of them have been Judaizing and have become strong Zionist friends of Israel. So that's a ray of hope. But no, I don't think anti-Semitism is the exclusive property of the left or the right. It's everywhere.
I would parlay my thoughts with Francisco's excellent analysis. I think it's wrong to divide America into right wing and left wing and think that it's the right wing that's anti-Semitic. Anyone who knows anything about American politics will tell you it's the left wing that's anti-Semitic. It's the progressives that's anti-Semitic. Let's use the word conservative and not right wing. It's the conservatives in America that are made up of ordinary people, of evangelicals. Many of them are Christian Zionists. They are embodied by people such as CUFI, Christians United for Israel, which is one of the largest groups. It is embodied by the new ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who actually has been to Israel 100 times and has a tourist guide license from the Ministry of Tourism. He knows Israel left and right, and he has vowed to no longer allow the use of the false term West Bank for Judea and Samaria, since that was invented by Jordan when it illegally invaded in 1948. So let's understand that Trump is not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's not a conservative. He's not a liberal. He's Trump. Now, it so happens he jumped into the Republican body and occupies that body. But the fact is, he has his own ideas. He has no policies. He only has objectives. He doesn't care if he uses a flower pot or a flamethrower. Judge him only by the end result. The American public has been liberated for its embrace of Israel due to the rise of the Trump regime and the complete rainbow of pro-Jewish and pro-Israel secretaries, commissioners, and government officials that is now doing what needs to be done. They're not just talking about it, they're doing it. It's toches on tish. Now, I don't know if you guys speak Yiddish here in Mexico City, but toches on tish, which is known in every Jewish community in the United States, means your ass on the table. Thanks for the question.
My question is that the UN wants to destroy Israel. In the book of Revelations, it says that nations are going to be united in the valley of Hesden or Megido. So, with everything that you're telling, that is CIA in all of the countries, is it true that that is going to be it? That the nations are going to be united in the valley of Hezreel to combat or disappear Jerusalem? My question is, many Jews or many brother Jews don't really know, think about or consider the New Testament or the Revelation books. Is it that the elites wrote it to be able to do it? Do you think that's going to happen?
So the question is, do you believe the Christian book of Revelations is a real prophetic book when it says that the nations will gather in the Jezreel Valley to destroy the state of Israel?
The Jezreel Valley.
Just to add on the question, I think another interesting point is the hypothesis if this book or this prophecy was written by anti-Semitic elites for it to make it happen. No, so not just if it's a real prophecy, but if maybe it was like a psychological operation for the people to want it to happen.
Okay, so the Valley of Jezreel, also known as Gay Ben Hinnom, one of my favorite places. Gay Ben Hinnom, it was the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom, where no one knew where the tribe of Hinnom was from, but it was the place where all the waste and the dung from Jerusalem filtered in. It's where the garbage was burned, and so it became known as Gehenna, or the fires of hell. And so that's how this came about. I don't think it's appropriate to for us to give our evaluation of the New Testament. Who wrote it, why they wrote it, and whether it's valid or not. But the drift of your question is quite important. And the drift of your question is, will the nations gather through the United Nations to uproot Israel? And I think the answer until a month ago was yes. Totally yes. But remember, even a Hitler had that in mind, and he was not following the New Testament. The United Nations must be dismantled. The United Nations is the successor to the League of Nations, which was on the ground at all times. Who created the United Nations? And all those organizations segued into the United Nations from 1945 to 1948. Who were the P5, the permanent five that created the United Nations? It was Communist China, it was Stalin, it was France, which was basically an ally of Nazi Germany, especially from Vichy, and it was the United States, and which didn't give a damn about the Jews, never bombed one railroad track, never liberated one concentration camp, and England, which did the same thing. And who else is in the United Nations? Well, guys like Poland and guys like Austria and all these different countries that are Jew haters. I have proposed.
In the Muslim states.
And the Muslim states, and of course, which were created one by one through the liberation movements of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. I have unsuccessfully attempted to replace the United Nations with a covenant of democratic nations where we could really have a democratic support of democracy and of Israel. Remember, it was the United Nations, and the president of Mexico led the way to declare that Zionism was racism. So it was the United Nations that refused to facilitate the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, and refused to have peacekeeping forces, which is why they invented something called the MFO, the Multi Forces Organization, where different countries were able to contribute. The United Nations is the enemy of peace. It's a fake body of peace with a fake refugee agency called UNRWA, with a fake refugee population. Somewhere along the way, somebody's going to have to ask, why is there a refugee camp in Gaza? Why is there a refugee camp in Ramallah? All of your predictions were going to come true until January 20th, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. There's a new sheriff in town and a new revelation to be revealed.
So to summarize, Edwin doesn't believe in the book of Revelations. He believes in Donald Trump, the new Messiah.
That's only partially true.
All right, next question.
Okay, we'll get 3 more questions in of the people in line and we'll finish. I know.
Hey, I can go all night until you guys are asleep.
Well, they were asking a question about how, well, in the US you feel the anti-Semitism is in the truth. As an Orthodox Jew that normally is using a kippah, I cannot walk like before October 7th in the US. This is not a question. This is just a remark. So my question more than that is that I was going to go to what we talked a lot about Gaza. We talked a lot about Hamas. What happens with Iran? I see that Trump said that the hell doors are going to open to Gaza. But what happens with Iran? That we know that if we truly end Iran, we would end a lot of what terrorism is, not only in Gaza, but in the world with Hezbollah, in Syria. Well, in Syria, there was one different movement, right? But why? Why are we not talking about that? Why do we not have this same position from Trump? Put your question in one sentence, just one sentence. Well, make your question in one sentence. Why? Why Trump is not talking about Iran with the same strength as he's talking about Gaza or Hamas?
So recently, so the question is why isn't Trump as hostile to Iran as he seems to be towards Hamas, right? Well, I don't think he's very hostile to Hamas at all. That's my position. I think that Trump, the ceasefire agreement that Israel signed was under pressure from Trump, even though he hadn't taken office. I hope that's not a terrorist attack next door. But certainly Trump has recently been making very friendly gestures towards Iran. So he's said publicly that he doesn't want war with Iran, that he would like to negotiate with Iran, that he wants peace with Iran. And what that means is that he wants to get along with the jihadi state that is trying to destroy the state of Israel. So in my book, that means that he is not really the friend of Israel. He is not helping Israel either symbolically or diplomatically or militarily to defeat Iran, which is what a real friend of Israel would do. All that he needs to do is to green light an Israeli attack on Iran and maybe give it some logistical support. As we now know, Israel could easily take out Iran. Israel already made a very limited attack that in fact destroyed all of Iran's air defenses without losing a single jet fighter. So clearly, all that Trump would have to do to get rid of Iran as a threat is to allow Israel to get rid of it. And it seems to me that that would be in the interest of U.S. citizens, right? So if Donald Trump is defending U.S. citizens, well, he should be fighting world jihad. And he doesn't even have to do anything much himself, or the United States doesn't need to do anything much. Israel is going to do the job. So why the question, the obvious question for anybody who is supporting Trump, as Edwin is why doesn't Trump simply green light Israel's destruction of Iran's oil infrastructure and nuclear infrastructure, which would then produce a revolution in Iran, because the Iranians don't want that regime?
Here's my answer. It's a variation of something I've said before while in Mexico. Francisco and others are in the Uber, driving around the stadium, trying to figure out what the hell's going on inside, and they don't know. They're guessing. I'm inside the stadium. I'm inside the dugout. I have a clear connection to the Trump circles. I can see the playing field. Your question was this: why has it not been green lighted? It's been green lighted. It was green lighted within the last week. The specific plan is being overseen by the Third Circle Directorate in the IDF. CENTCOM will be involved. The United States has to give Israel 5 things. They're not bombs. And those 5 things are coming, and Israel will have the cover. So when Francisco says it hasn't been green lighted, the better question is, isn't it true that it's been green lighted? But green lighted for when? So what you need to do is not figure out what's going on in the basement of the Live Aqua Hotel. You need to wait until things play out. Everyone in the circles is saying the same thing. It's been green lighted. Israel will do what it needs to do. It's got the weaponry, it's got the game plan, it's got the green light, it's got the permission, it will have the diplomatic cover, and what you need to do is just wait a few minutes. It all can't be done at once. Qatar cannot be taken down immediately. Iran cannot be taken down immediately, but it's alphabetical, and H comes before I, and Q comes after I. So please, don't say it hasn't been green lighted when you don't understand what's going on. It's been green lighted.
All right, just a quick comeback. I actually have memory. I've been a friend of Edwin Black for years now, and I've heard this very same story before. In fact, Edwin Black told me a few years ago that an attack on Iran was imminent, that it was going to happen in a matter of 2 weeks or even a month. And that was based on the same inside information that he's boasting about right now. And he's had a book ready to go called Israel Attacks Iran.
Strikes Iran.
Strikes Iran, sorry. And he can't publish it because it never happens. But he keeps promising me that it's going to happen next month. So he's making the same promise right now, and now we have a bet. So we've bet $100.
Wait a minute, was it pesos or dollars?
No. You know it's dollars.
You sure it's not pesos?
No, you know it's dollars. It's $100. If 2025 runs out and Israel has not attacked Iran, I will collect $100.
Oh.
I hope I lose the bet, but I think I have the right model of the world, and in fact, unfortunately, I will collect.
Okay, you get the $100 and you get a bowl of Escamoles. But the fact of the matter is that 2 specific attacks were underway and in the air. In the air. I knew when they were happening, and they were in the air. One was stopped by Obama, and Obama denied Israel in the air the friend or foe codes to fly over Iraq. In other words, when you go over American installations, and there are many in Iraq at that time, you need radar signatures to describe if you're friend or foe. That was one. That was real. Second, the second one was killed by Ehud Barak while the airplanes were in the air, and Ehud Barak said, this is a violation of international law, and they must be stopped, and the decision was to pull the airplanes back. In December, when Israel did attack, they were restricted by the blackmailing Biden administration to not touch the nuclear and not touch the oil. So they did the next best thing. They took out the entire radar facility. Now, we've talked this to death. I know what's going on. And you guys are making long distance calls. And for me, it's a local call.
Excuse me? No. We're well, Iran. Look. What matters, the attack that matters, is the attack that takes.
It hasn't happened yet.
No, that hasn't happened. We agree on that. So
the big one has not occurred.
Yeah.
And by the way, Francisco wants to lose the $100. He's praying to lose the $100 because we both want Israel to achieve the same end result.
Well, but look, I think actually just the quickest comeback, because we need to move on. But I think Edwin just made my argument for me. Every time, according to him, every time Israel was about to finally attack Iran, the U.S. government stopped Israel. And I think that's going to continue to happen.
Trump.
So my question is for Edwin. So when talking about risk management, you always have to consider the risks that you believe are very unlikely, but if they happen, the consequence is very, very dire. So there are many, many characters in Israel. We just talked about a few of them. Let's not talk about Netanyahu if you want, but we can talk about Ehud Barak. We can talk about many people in the Israeli army, such as Aaron Haliva, who he was the chief of intelligence during October 7th. And many, many people actually believe that his actions were deliberate and treacherous. How do you cover against this risk? Even if it is very unlikely, how do you deal with the risk of people like Ehud Barak or Aaron Haliva, or even if you want to talk about Bibi Netanyahu, that he actually, it was known after October 7th that before October 7th, during 1 or 2 years, he was secretly allowing a lot of money to be handed over from Qatar to Hamas. So I understand that you believe it's very unlikely that he is a traitor, but we still need to consider the possibility. And how do you deal with that possibility?
Okay, great question. Thank you, Isaac. So I can barely see it's you with the light coming in my eyes. So let's deal with the risk. Yes, the risk is absolutely there, but I do not believe that the people running Israel are traitors except for Ehud Barak. Certainly there's an argument to be made for arrogance and negligence, and there will be hell to pay. The gates of hell will open. So Israel's not going to have a choice. It's not going to have a choice. It's not going to ask you. It's not going to ask Trump. And it's not going to ask me, because we're a very short distance away from the 90% HEU high energy uranium to be put into the warhead and be shot at Israel. Iran has 5 nuclear bombs today, maybe 8. Not in 2 weeks, not in 2 months. They had them last year, and they're making them more powerful now. They're an R265 shock generator hemisphere circled by 5 millimeter PETN filled grooves, and they will explode simultaneously, and all that power will be captured by an exploding bridge wire. They've tested this many times with other metals, and that exploding bridge wire will transduce all that power into a neutron initiator, and that neutron initiator will throw one wild neutron into that HEU unstable core, and that will make the chain reaction and the mushroom cloud. This ball will be put inside of this R265 shock generator into the warhead of a Shahab 3 missile. They've tested it many times, and they are rushing to figure out how to move that stuff without the clandestine services in America and Israel perceiving it, because the moment that warhead is assembled according to the Ahmed Project and all the nuclear experts in the world connected to the IAEA, the moment that goes into the missile, and that missile is taken from underground and putting into a launch pad, that is the moment that Israel will have to go. And it won't ask Trump, and it won't ask Biden, and it won't ask me, and it won't ask you. And risk or no risk, Israel will have to destroy it. And that minute is coming very soon. That's the answer. There is a risk, but at some point, the desire to stand up to this nuclear annihilation must come to fruition.
James Risen, the first thing I would say about that is that if everything Edwin said is true, then Iran should have been attacked a long time ago. I mean, there's no time to waste. So it's amazing that this hasn't happened if the U.S. bosses don't want Iran to drop a bomb on Israel. But the other thing I would say is that James Risen, former journalist at the New York Times, wrote an entire book where he explains that according to a bunch of people in the CIA that he spoke to, the blueprints for the Iranian nuclear bomb were provided by the CIA. So again, I don't think we need to trust. I don't think we should trust the people running clandestine operations if that's what they're doing.
The entire world in this field knows that the CIA did not give the nuclear blueprint to Iran. That was done by A.Q. Khan from the Pakistani designs, which came from China. The entire world knows this. I've written about it. If you want all the details, just go into Google and find my Times of Israel story. The shape and design of the Iranian nuclear warhead, where I give all the specifics. Forget about this guy Risen. Forget about his book. The entire world knows that this came from A.Q. Khan. We have his book. We have every piece of documentation, and the entire the entire analytical world that concerns itself with this is unanimous in knowing this.
A.Q. Khan is who does he work for?
Pakistan.
Pakistan what? What in Pakistan? Who employs him in Pakistan?
He had his own laboratory. In response to the Indian nuclear detonation, Pakistan decided to rush make a bomb. They got A.Q. Khan, who took the Hiroshima model and designed his own version of this. And I've described what that version is, and it's been overly documented that he gave the bomb. He was paid money. He was tried for crimes. He was forgiven for it. And this is a profoundly well established knowledge. He had the science. He understood the metallurgy. He understood the rocket propulsion. This was a Pakistani deal aided by China, and there is no potentiality that somebody called Risen from the New York Times has figured out that America gave the blueprints. I have a copy of the blueprints. In fact, not only do I have a copy of the blueprints, I actually showed the blueprints on one of my shows, so you can see you can even see the green door on my show of where the plans were stored for the Ahmed project. I've been studying this for 15 years. I've been writing about it for 15 years. It was Pakistan that gave it to Iran.
Okay, so does that mean that the Pakistani ISI is who gave this to Iran?
Yeah, I know your next statement that the ISI is an artificial limb of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yes, indeed.
You can say that, but you know something? Not every apple has a CIA worm in it. Sometimes it's just an apple. And in this particular case, the history of the development of the people who were involved. And by the way, there was also an attempt to develop this in Syria, which Israel bombed. So let's not confuse the story and say that the CIA in Virginia gave it to him when the entire world knows it's an AQ Khan model and the Pakistanis worked with him. They've got the bombs now. The International Atomic Energy Agency knows this. They've documented it. It's been in all the papers. Let's not use Bubba Mises to talk about what's really going on in the Iranian nuclear program. By the way, that bomb is not designed to hit the ground. That bomb is designed to explode 550 meters above the ground.
Okay, but you're not denying, are you, that the ISI was created by the CIA?
The ISI was created by the CIA, but AQ Khan
Okay,
set
hold
up
on.
his own operation.
Okay, fine. But so either James Risen is right or you are right. And it seems to me that either way, the CIA is behind it.
No, listen, I had lunch in the CIA cafeteria and my stomach hurt the next day. It doesn't mean they were trying to poison me. We just have to face facts as we know them. Now, are you asking me whether the Central Intelligence Agency monitored and was aware, because they had to be aware of these international transmissions, these laboratories that were being set up, the heavy water that was being used, the fact that these exploding bridge wires were being purchased? The CIA didn't sell the exploding bridge wires. The United States had a full sanctions regime. The only reason that Iran did not dropped that bomb last year was because the Biden administration was facilitating the massive inflow of millions of dollars by waiving the sanctions and allowing Iran to sell oil to China. And as of 24 hours ago, the amount of that oil that Iran is producing to China due to the sanctions regime coming in has now been reduced by 90%. Basically, Iran knows the attack is coming. They've said, we know it's coming. They said, you destroy our nuclear facilities, we'll build 1,000 more. So let's try to face the facts and not tell stories about the CIA and James Risen and everything else. It's AQ Khan, it's Pakistan. It took many years, and the reason it has taken so long is because Israel sabotaged the equipment with a clandestine CIA Israel virus called Stuxnet, assassinated the engineers, killed them with motorcycle bombs, and had a regime that delayed, But at some point, Iran finally was able to say, we're going to take our 60% uranium, which we've been increasing at the rate of 4% a week, and now we're going to make these bombs. Remember, you don't need a 90% high uranium to blow up a bomb. You need 90% to make it small, to miniaturize it. If you want to make it 64%, but the size of a Volkswagen bus, you can put it in a container ship and run it across the Mediterranean and explode it just outside a Tel Aviv port. But they want to miniaturize it, and they want to use their Shahab 3 missiles.
All right, I think it's still remarkable that all of these different groups that the CIA creates, all they do is strengthen jihadism. I mean, you're not denying that the ISI was created by the CIA. And the other question that's very interesting is why, in all these years, the US has never attacked Iran. I mean, they attacked Iraq. And the consequence of attacking Iraq is that Iran took over Iraq, and that gave Iran a land corridor all the way to the border of Israel, because Iran was allied with Syria and it controls Lebanon. So the practical effect of invading Iraq was to give Iran a land corridor to Israel. And the other effect that I mentioned in our other event is that it produced ISIS, because ISIS emerged from the U.S. military prison system that the U.S. created in Iraq, and that's also known by everybody. So the lingering question is, why in all this time? Look, the public excuse that
Let's wrap it up.
The public, I let you speak for a very long time. The public excuse that the U.S. bosses used to invade Iraq was that Iraq was supposedly developing weapons of mass destruction. Nobody disagrees that Iran is trying to produce a bomb, or in your case, you believe they already have it. That's the same excuse that they would have needed to attack Iran, but that never happens. They only attacked Iraq, and the practical consequence of that was to strengthen Iran. So it seems to me that you don't have a good model for why they don't attack Iran.
Please wait a few days.
All right. Okay. One last question.
Good evening. How do you think that this war is going to advance? What's going to happen with the territory and the Palestinians? And how do you see the future, not the close future, but more long-term future of Israel?
Well, I'll answer that first if I could. Sure. This is a very important question, because if you remove the people from Gaza, and even in small groups, and put them in different countries, the country of their choice. Call that country Egypt. Call that country Australia, which has taken in 2,100 Gazans. All you are doing is exporting Satan. Now, as Francisco has pointed out, the nations of the Middle East don't want the Palestinians, because they went into Jordan and they made Black September. They went into Lebanon and they made Fatah land, and they kidnapped innocent Lebanese and took their organs out to sell them. And Egypt doesn't want them because they've been aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood. Nobody wants these guys. I'm telling you that Gaza must be blasted to smithereens, which is being promised, and the population must not only be removed, it must be supervised. Now, I want to give you 3 examples. 1, the Bushido warmongers of Japan were de-radicalized and supervised into passivity. The Nazi death cult in Germany was de-radicalized, denazified, and pacified into proper citizenship. Most of you don't know that there are 2 concentration camps set up right now in northern Syria by the international community administered by the Red Cross. One is called Al-Hal, and the other is called Raj, R-O-J. These concentration camps, or you can call them camps, whatever word you want to use, are the forced detainment of the families of ISIS fighters. That means that ISIS has been defeated, but the families of the fighters are in prisons, and the families are kept in a concentration camp where there's no running water and no sanitation, and they are emerging as from age 3, 4, and 5 as new jihadis, the so-called ISIS lion cubs. NBC in the United States did an investigation and found that these kids, 4 or 5, were just going like this. They want to slice you up. So we have to think, we must superintend these Gazans, because these Gazans will bring death and destruction, just like the Nazis, just like the ISIS people, wherever they go, whether it's Montreal or whether it's Mexico City or whether it's Manhattan. So your question is very tremulous, because yes, we can do this now. We can make an exit arrangement for these people now. We can put them in the Saudi Arabian empty quarter. But the point is, where will they be in 5 to 10 years? If they're not supervised like the families of the ISIS fighters, then they will rise again to somehow find a way to slit somebody's throat and say they did it for God.
All right.
Sorry.
So on the question of Gaza, I agree with much that Edwin said. I've been saying for a while that the only real solution to the problem in Gaza is that the state of Israel has to have complete control over the territory, but not just the territory. Israel has to control all of the institutions, because the Arab Palestinians, in a sense, they are victims. Edwin says there are no innocent people there, but I take a different position. I think that the people in Gaza are victims of the terrorists who have been controlling their education for over a generation now. So they're indoctrinated from the moment they're little kids. The children's shows, the schools, they're all teaching them from an early age that what they have to do when they become adults is to become Jew killers. And Edwin is right. That's not going to be solved in 3 days. We need a generation, and maybe 2, as Edwin says, of them living in a completely different institutional space, so that this poison of the mind can be filtered out. But I want to correct one thing that Edwin said. So Edwin said that after the war, Germany was denazified. I don't believe that's true. James Stuart Martin, who was supposed to be in charge of the denazification, wrote a book published in 1950 called All Honorable Men, where he denounced that the US bosses had sabotaged his efforts to denazify Germany at every stage, and that in fact they had favored the return of German Nazis into positions of authority in Germany. And something that he didn't know that happened in 1954 after he published his book is that Reinhard Gehlen, the same Gehlen that recruited all of those Nazis for the creation of the CIA, Reinhard Gehlen was made the head of the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the BND, or the West Germany's equivalent of the CIA, in 1954. Okay, so the U.S. government told the West German government, Gehlen is now going to be the head of your intelligence agency. The Gehlen org is now going to be your intelligence agency. So they returned the Nazis to power in Germany. Germany was not denazified. And something else that happened that several historians have documented is that fascists in different parts of Europe were returned to power after the war with the help of the CIA, of course, which was a nest of Nazis. they were dressed up as Christian Democrats. You know, they gave them a suit and tie, and they returned them to power with the help of the clandestine operations of the CIA. So again, this is another argument for not allowing clandestine operations.
I would just say that Francisco is mainly quite accurate. I myself went through the denazification files, which were closed at the Institute for Zeitgeschichte in Germany. I was not allowed to see those files, but as usual, as Francisco knows my method, I forced my way in. I got the files. And so I think, to be a little more precise, the big shots, like Werner von Braun, was not denazified, but taken to the United States to head up the U.S. space program and make appearances on the Disney Channel. And I think that the CIA largely took big Nazis and Gestapo guys and turned them into operatives for the CIA, because they flipped into a new war. The new war was to fight the Soviet menace. When I said denazified, I meant the average person. And the average person was denazified, or perhaps pseudo-denazified. Once a Nazi, always a Nazi. But many efforts were made, and I know Germans very well, and they have cast off their Nazi past. It took a couple of generations, and I say to you now, this won't be done in a day. And Francisco, it won't be done in a single generation. So you need to check with me in about 100 years to figure out if the de-radicalization program was successful.
That's after you reincarnate.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you've already informed me you won't need to reincarnate.
So I recommend you read Tuvia Tenenbaum's I Sleep in Hitler's Bedroom, which is an ethnographic investigation of the ideology of ordinary Germans. And I think you will get a very different impression about the supposed denazification of Germany when you read that.
Okay. Just to end this event in a positive note, I want to ask, and first Francisco, because I think I might guess what Edwin's answer might be. Facing and knowing these hard to swallow truths about who's against us, who's with us, and what gives you hope for Israel, for the Jews, for the whole Western civilization?
What gives me hope is that today we are living through a technological and communications revolution that in many ways is similar to what happened when the printing press was invented. When the printing press was invented, all of a sudden it became very cheap for people with just a little bit of capital to get a printing press together and start producing thousands and thousands of copies of pamphlets and books and so forth. This is what allowed the Protestant movements to compete with the Catholic Church, and it allowed revolutionary movements to share their propaganda with each other and begin to fight oppression, which ultimately made it possible to transform the Western world into the modern democratic world that we are still in for the next 5 minutes. So I think that the technologies that have recently been invented that allow us to circumvent the major media and make it possible for ordinary U.S. citizens to communicate directly with each other, right? Through podcasts and through blogs and so forth. Those technologies are giving us a small window of opportunity in which we can share the best knowledge that we can put together to defend ourselves from the forces that wish to destroy the democratic West. And I think we can do it. I think it is possible to win if we take this seriously and we spend a lot of our own money, because we have to do that. Ordinary Westerners have to sink their money right now into the propagation of the knowledge that defends the West. And if we do it fast enough, and explain how the system works fast enough, then we may be able to save ourselves from the train of destruction. Because the bosses that are trying to destroy us, they need us not to understand the system. This is why they manage reality. This is why they corrupt the media and academia, because they need us not to understand what they've been doing. They need us not to understand that they launched world jihad from the West, that they've been financing and supporting and giving all kinds of help to the world jihad movement. And if I really, this is my bet. I'm betting that we can do this. This is what management of reality is all about. So I hope that we can wake up enough people fast enough, and if we succeed, I think we can have a new enlightenment, just like we did when the printing press was invented.
Okay, and you want to know what gives me hope?
Definitely.
Everyone who knows me knows I have no hope. Totally. I don't have any hope. I have vigilance. And all I'm trying to do is make sure that we can survive. So, my hope, when you say who's our friend and who's not our friend, no one's our friend. No one's our friend. Somebody who's our friend Monday noon will not be our friend Tuesday noon because of oil or some other geo.
But what about Trump? He's our friend.
Trump is our friend for the minute, and I'm thankful for it. But the minute that he does something wrong, I will change my tune. The point is, Trump is not forever, but I would like the Jewish people to be forever.
Right. Amen.
Before Ricardo says the last words, we're creating a group of the people that came today. So please, before you leave, come with me or with the elegant Joel, and it's a WhatsApp group where you are going to be able to be in contact with Edwin and Francisco, and also to be involved in other small events that we make. Most of them are not with payment. We just want to generate a community, and as Francisco is saying, to get this message to the rest of the world. So please come to us, to me, and to Joel. Well, first of all, I would like to give a big round of applause to Francisco and Edwin for everything. And I would like to thank you for all of this long presentation and addressing all of the questions at this long time, like late times of the night. And it's information that is not only relevant, as at the beginning I was saying, as an intellectual interest, but for our life and for the life of the generations to come, our children. And truly, the entire story. This is something that we've seen generation after generation. This is something that our wise ones in the Judaism tried to convey, and we read it in the Agada of Pesach every year. Every generation is gonna come for you. It's where we want to really take it as a truth. Today is for us. It was for our grandparents to fight, and for us to fight. It's always the same. We cannot wait for it to be solved. It's a reality that we would like it not to exist. We would like to live at peace, at ease, and do our lives. But as Jewish people, we do not have that option. Either we're the light of the nations and we change the world for good, and we convey ethic values, moral, how to behave, and truly, and that way we can get peace. We can get peace not only for ourselves, but also for the entire world. This is the way that we are gonna be able to fight our enemies, but we have to go out and fight. The first thing that we have to do to be able to do that is survive, defend ourselves, be willing to defend ourselves. Because as we saw today, it's pretty clear. If we don't defend ourselves, no one is going to do it for us. But on the other hand side, I can also see that when we are outside defending ourselves, there's no one to stop us. We are. Israel has the best army of the world. It has been described by military experts of any type. When we're out fighting and we're decided, there's no one to stop us. And it's not only an issue of a military fight or war. It's ideological, it's educational, when we stand up and we defend our rights. Truly, I make sure that millions and millions of people are gonna come with us, and we see movements of Christians, secular people, and all of the different types, because we're not the only ones that are fighting for the West. There's a lot of people that understand this, but we have to take this front of battle. If we are willing to walk with that flag upright, people are gonna come back to us, because we're majority. The people in the Western world want to live at peace. We share the same values of this individual freedom. We're not selling something that is radical or different. What we really want is to defend civilization that we already have. So if we take that front of battle, there's no one that can stop us. And we can have maybe these governments, these institutions that may seem to have a lot of power, that are enemies and that want to attack us, but truly they depend on us. If they're not with us, they're nothing. They're at our service. If we're aware and we understand the truth of what they're doing, we expose them, we force them to act as it should be, according to the laws that they work, that are our laws, that come from the Bible, that come from the Torah, from these values, then they do not have any other way than following us. And I'm sure that we're gonna vanquish. Now we have to do our job. Everyone from their places know what they can do, and it can be as simple as coming to this talk or looking at it in YouTube and sharing it, maybe supporting or donating something or sharing it just with your friends. There should be some that can have different type of resources. Maybe do they have energy to make voluntary work to help us in an investigation, or not only with our organization, with any other that is dedicating in this movement. And truly, everyone can know what they can do and to think, what resources do I have to be in that fight? What can I do to be there in the battle? I am sure that with all of those suspects, we make a movement that is unstoppable. The truth is that it's not enough to think that we will vanquish. It is to stand up and do it, and that Hashem is with us. Thank you so much. Truly, it was an amazing experience. This is the first time that we make an event like this. And I'm really happy, satisfied. It was an amazing conversation. And it's not only a presentation, it's really a conversation. So truly, thank you so much for coming here today with us.